Hello, welcome and welcome back. This is Jacob and today we are going to be continuing the module short story narrations for the various operators in Arknights. Today with the one for operator Totter. Now very quickly here, before we continue with the usual segment of story first and then what the module does for the operator later, Totter is someone who does appear in the main story of Arknights, of course, and as such there will be no spoilers for the main story of Arknights. However, considering that the module talks about certain segments of Totter's life, I do want to bring up at least 2 or 3 little things here up before we head in. Number 1. Totter is someone who was born and grew up in the jungles of Sargon, after which he moved north, where he both got himself a nice little cottage in some snowy woods, but also established himself as a mercenary along the way. Later, after the Londinium arc concludes, at least for him, he pretty much retires back to the house, goes through quite the depression apparently, from judging from his file, but also at one single point, the doctor apparently makes a visit to that little cottage of his and the two of them have a conversation. I'm bringing these specific points up because through these, the file, or rather the story here today, will probably make a bit more sense. But for more information, if you have Totter, just read his file in game, it will fill you in on the rest of the details. But for now, let us proceed into our module short story for today, which is titled Snow Globe. And this is how it goes. I should get out of here, he said, bowing his head as he wrapped the arrowhead tightly with twine. A few days ago, a group of mercenaries passed by. They were in need of an archer and I believe I can fill that role. We'll be traveling through the vast desert, then on through layers of towering forest, and ultimately arrive at a northern city. It's a snowy place, and even varying several layers, you'll still shiver from that winter cold. I can make new friends there, and save enough money to buy a huge house to share with my loved ones. I should get out of here. It's too hot. Everyone's always sweating. Life's pretty boring too. The only thing there is to do is chase the animals around every day. I believe I'm meant for more. What do you think? He swung the arrow a few times before knocking it gently into the bow. The arrow flew off into the distance, beyond the reach of his sight. You should get out of here. He bowed his head and refused to answer as he continued chopping wood with his axe. In a few days, a group of mercenaries will come, and they are in need of an archer. I think you're perfect for the job. You'll travel through a vast forest, traverse fields of waving wheat, and ultimately arrive at a small town in the south. It rarely snows there, and the trees stay green even in winter. It's warm enough, so wear only a single layer of clothing. You'll make new friends there, save some money, and maybe even find a lady to spend your life with. You shouldn't stay here. It's too cold and snowstorms come in the winter. Look around you. There's nothing to do here. The only thing that comes close is hunting. I believe you're meant for more. What do you think? He weighed the axe in his hand and carefully placed it atop the pile of wood. He remained silent and merely rubbed his teeth against his lip. He kept at it for a while, enjoying the sweet, tangy taste in his mouth. Finally, he spoke. No, I'm fine here. I should stay. What are you even staying for? I'm waiting. For what? He fell silent again. He had no answer to this question. For the storms to subside? For the snow to melt? Or maybe only for an arrow, shot by a young boy, to break the bounds of time and space with the courage of ignorance and naive bravado, tearing through the layers of his life's disguises, to pierce his very heart. Then his heart would shatter, only to light up once more, filled with warmth anew. And that would be our little story here. As indicated, this is a story that starts in his past while he's still in the jungles of Sargon, pretty much making the decision to leave the jungle and go further north. Like I said, he, along the lines, establishes himself as a mercenary, forms his own mercenary group even, and later we meet him in Londinium. Now, after the Londinium stuff concludes, he will retire there. He will be very depressed as well, more on that in his file, and at one point the Doctor will visit him. As described in his final portion, I think it's in the promotional section of the file, the Doctor joins him for some hot soup to warm themselves up, as the two of them are chatting, and I think this little file where it starts with, where it mirrors the first part with the words "you should get out of here," is pretty much the Doctor very weirdly and very accurately echoing what Totter said in the past, apparently. Now, just to be absolutely 100% fair here, I think this entire first part is Totter saying stuff to someone. He might be discussing stuff with his father, with his mother, with his family, while some are out hunting with them, considering their background and stuff like that. But this second part is literally the Doctor, seemingly the Doctor mirroring this whole conversation he had in his younger years and throwing it back at Totter. But Totter is still waiting for something more on a poetic sense of enlightening him. Again, more on that in his file, and I swear to you it will make more sense once you read it, but that would be too long of a video to cover that. So, what do the traits and talents say on base before we go into what the module upgrades? First and foremost, he has one trait, of course, which is attacks the heaviest enemy first, and his one and only talent is Illuminating Eyes. Can attack invisible enemies. If there are invisible enemies within attack range, he will also gain plus 20% attack. The 3% here comes from the extra potentials. If you don't have potentials for him, it's gonna be lower, of course. Now, what do we get from the module? The basic stats of attack and defense will go up by a small degree, but enough. But he also gains, obviously, another trait. This one says, when attacking a heavy enemy, weight 3 or greater, his attack will be increased to 115%. So, he pretty much becomes more efficient at killing the more heavier targets. Now, what do we get when we upgrade the module? His one and only talent will be upgraded, of course, but only in the regards of the percent attack bonus going up from 20% to 25 to 30% at max. Now, I'll say this, this is one of those modules where I don't think it matters much if you upgrade it all the way through. It is a 30% increase, and obviously you're gonna be using Totter in most cases where there are invisible enemies, of course, on the map, considering he can snipe them and hit them pretty hard on top of it. Most of his attacks can hit pretty much, or rather, both his skills can hit multiple enemies at once. One of them, the second skill, becomes even more powerful with the specific stuff on it. But this is a small little upgrade. Now, on the more beneficial side, this is still a 4-star unit. So, it is very cheap. As you can see here at the bottom, this is the entire cost it would take for Stage 3, just to bump it all the way up. Stage 2 is this. Stage 3 and 2 are this. It is very cheap. If you do use Totter a lot, maybe get it, but then again, like I said, this is a very niche talent, which will only trigger if there is a invisible enemy inside of his attack range. Outside of that, the base module is already pretty good, with the very good attack bonus that comes from the trait against the heavy units. And considering there are quite a lot of stages where there are heavy invisible units, especially in stuff like integrated strategies, that is a pretty nifty thing to have, so he can kill them more efficiently and faster. But yeah, anyway, this will make it for this video. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a like on the video. It would help me out a lot. And of course, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. There's a lot more on the channel. And speaking of main story as well, if you're someone who is still catching up to the main story, in the description of the video there's a link provided to the entire playlist for the main story as of current. New main chapter is out literally 2 days after I'm done recording this, I think. A day probably after this video goes live. Very hyped for that. So stick around. We're gonna be doing some voice acting, some narrating, some extra information adding as usual. You know, all the good stuff. And of course, if you want to support me and my work more directly, there are memberships on the channel. And as always, there will be no video behind a membership ever. It is literally just there to support me and my work more directly. So thank you very much to the members that are already there. Thank you very much for listening and watching this. And I hope you have a fantastic day wherever you are. And I will see you in the next one. Until then, bye-bye.